Hi, welcome to the first lecture of Section 1, The Age of Discovery. My name is Dr. Michael Bardot, and I hope you enjoy this section. If we take a look at the first slide, we see a map of Europe, and I would like to point out a few interesting things. First of all, let me say that I believe that maps are very important to understanding the who, what, when, and why behind history. Because of that, we will take a look at maps periodically in the slide lectures as we try to chart the growth and change of Europe from the 1500s to the 20th century. On this map in particular, I would like to point out a few things. First of all, in the center of the map, we have a country known as the Holy Roman Empire, instead of what we might expect to see, which is the country Germany. The Holy Roman Empire was a holdover of the medieval period, and as we will see as time went on, it began to fragment and eventually fell apart into dissolute German countries that would eventually unify into the modern day country of Germany. We have a very similar story when we take a look at Italy. Italy was made up of many city-states, the two most powerful of which were probably the Papal States located in the middle, and the Kingdom of Naples, otherwise known as the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, throughout the 15 and 1600s. If we take a look at this map, by 1500, we do have a unified Spain. However, it is important to remember that Spain had only just unified in the late 1400s, approximately in the 1480s. Other than those key facets, we do have a lot of normal-looking positions like France, England, etc. The last thing that I would probably point out is the gray area to the bottom right, which is called the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was an Islamic empire that had been developed and put together approximately in the 1290s, which would continue to kind of sustain itself, albeit at a much limited capacity as we approach the 1900s, and would eventually join the forces of the Germans in World War I. However, the Ottoman Empire did not survive World War I, and it was broken up in 1918 and 1920 to create that place that we call today the modern Middle East. One of the key trends, or one of the key, themes of the Age of Discovery is a time period of great change. We're going to take a look at a couple of the avenues in which this change took place. First and foremost, we have the dawning of the age of gunpowder. And in terms of importance, the transition from basically hand-to-hand weapons to gunpowder weapons forced a lot of the change that took place as countries became more modern. The advantages of gunpowder, as the slide predicts, was that kings and governments could have a cheaper army, utilizing the middle class and the lower class as soldiers. Due to the nature of gunpowder and its consequences of force and deadly accuracy, we will see as we approach from 1500 to 1900 higher rates of casualties and a larger cost in terms of both psychological and human loss. Parallel developments that accompanied the age of gunpowder, quite honestly, was the obsolete creation of masonry structures more commonly referred to as castles. Although the Europeans tried to hold on to their old ancient castles, the arrival of gunpowder weapons pretty much made castle fortification obsolete. We will also see, as these armies are increased in size or in terms of the pool of soldiers that kings and governments could choose from, we see an increase in army size. To give you an example of this, approximately the largest medieval army was about 40,000. But as we take a look at armies in the 16, 17, and 1800s, we see the total number of soldiers rise from 50, 60,000 to be in the hundreds of thousands, until we reach the modern era in which armies are numbered in the millions. Last but not least, we have a dramatic shift or change in the use of naval vessels and naval battles. Prior to the dawning of gunpowder, naval warfare consisted of ramming boats together in order to sail. You would try to sink the enemy's boat without damaging yours to such a great extent. However, the switch over to gunpowder weapons and cannons enabled naval battles to take on a more distant type of warfare, in which now the object was to sink enemy boats by basically using cannons or cannonballs to create large enough holes to sink them. We also had a lot of educational and intellectual changes taking place. For example, we had the kind of ending of a period of time known as the Renaissance. In the Renaissance, we saw a rediscovery of literacy and a rebirth of what we would call individualism, or the identity of the individual member of society. We had monumental breakthroughs in astronomy. We had a switch over from what we call the geocentric theory, which was a belief that the Earth was the center of the universe, to adopting the heliocentric theory, which meant that the sun was the center of the universe. Galileo aided in this transition through the creation of a major technological innovation known as the telescope. And yet, quite ironically, as the telescope made mankind's vision of the universe become larger, a Swedish scientist by the name of Leeuwenhoek invented the microscope, which opened up the microscopic world to human understanding. It was also during the Age of Discovery that society, although it was in the midst of all this change, remained somewhat consistent. Although urban populations were increasing, which forced the creation of both urban organizations like fire departments and garbage collection, we also see a growth in skilled labor. However, the family still remained the economic unit of society. Last but not least, during the Age of Discovery, we also have the fragmentation of religion. In this, we have the creation of what's called the Protestant Reformation, the English Reformation, and the Catholic Church's counter move, which is called the Counter-Reformation. As we will discuss these events in greater detail later, the important thing to remember is the tremendous change and war that this religious fragmentation caused. In terms of exploration and discovery, in the 1490s, we had the finding of a new world by Christopher Columbus. The key to understanding the discovery of the New World actually stems from earlier ideas and an earlier trade relationship in which the Europeans were seeking a better route to trade with China and India. The first sea route discovered was to circumnavigate Africa, which would mean that the Europeans would sail down the coast of Africa and back up into the Indian Ocean and later on into the South Pacific Seas. Columbus's idea was to try and eliminate this quite tedious but successful route down the coast of Africa and to chart a new path, which would be to sail around the earth. Now, although his ideas were flawed, Columbus did run into a country, or into actually two continents, which we call the Americas today. And this discovery, if you can call it that, opened up a new area of the world to European colonization. The 14 and 1500s were a tremendous time period of growth, change, and the resultant conflicts that comes from great change. As we start to look into particular topics within the Section 1 module, I hope that you will see this continuing trend of innovation and change and conflict as we move from the 1400s, the late 1400s, into the early 1700s and beyond. Thank you.